In the standard approach to AI accountability, researchers follow a familiar sequence. They test a system, measure where it fails, and publish results to demonstrate bias. This animated diagram visualizes a typical outcome from those tests, a stark 30% error rate, indicating that a system works poorly for certain demographic groups. To an engineer or a procurement officer, those abstract bars dictate policy and purchasing decisions. But a performance table does not trigger empathy in the general public. The people who actually suffer the consequences of these failures belong to a group that most governance frameworks do not even have a name for. They are what researchers call the excluded, populations harmed by algorithmic systems, often without knowing those systems exist. When an AI system denies someone a loan or falsely identifies them as a criminal, the challenge is clear. How do we compel the people in charge to actually care enough to fix the system? A strict reliance on statistical evidence leaves a dangerous accountability vacuum. A spreadsheet full of error rates might satisfy a compliance requirement, but it carries zero emotional weight or lived history. In 2022, Dr. Joy Buolamwini published her doctoral thesis at MIT, offering a formal framework to solve that empathy gap. She formalized a concept called the Evocative Audit. Storytelling and artistic performance are not treated as packaging for technical data here. Instead, this new methodology evaluates a system by forcing people to feel the harm of algorithmic discrimination firsthand. She grounds this approach in Black feminist epistemology, a theoretical school of thought that explicitly treats an individual's lived experience and the emotion attached to it as rigorous authoritative knowledge. In this framework, empathy operates as an ethical requirement, not a bias. By expanding the definition of evidence to include human experience, the evocative audit bridges the gap between cold data and ethical responsibility. It forces the creators of these systems to look directly at the people they are erasing. We can see how this works in practice by looking at her landmark 2018 study, Gender Shades. This was the algorithmic audit. Her team tested commercial facial recognition systems against a balanced dataset of 1,270 photos, proving massive racial and gender bias through reproducible error rates. The companion piece was an evocative audit called AI Ain't I a Woman. It utilized a core mechanism called the counter demo, taking a piece of documented evidence and weaponizing the system's own outputs against its claims of accuracy. When IBM's commercial AI was fed an image of Ida B. Wells, the system labeled the civil rights icon with a deeply racist slur dating back to 19th century minstrel shows. That output carries a historical weight and a violation of human dignity that no statistical chart can possibly convey. In another counter demo, a commercial system completely misgendered Serena Williams. This is the exact algorithmic erasure the excoded face every day, brought into plain sight. The 30% error rates gave regulators the institutional credibility to demand algorithmic improvements. But watching a machine strip away a person's identity gave the public the emotional urgency to demand those changes immediately. This matrix lays out the 4 specific types of evocative audits Buolamwini developed, proving this is a repeatable scientific framework. Comparative audits run different groups through the exact same conditions to show stark disparities, while participatory audits allow everyday users to upload their own data and verify the system's failures themselves. Performative audits use poetry or drama to demonstrate algorithmic harm to a live audience. Singular audits rely on one highly potent example, like a researcher wearing a white mask simply to make a facial recognition system detect her face. This organized structure takes personal trauma, which institutions typically dismiss as mere anecdote, and elevates it into undeniable, categorized evidence. Combining these 2 forms of auditing produced immense pressure. By 2020, major players like IBM, Amazon, and Microsoft had either restricted or completely paused their sales of facial recognition technology. Yet traditional systems still struggle to recognize this type of knowledge. Recently, a multi-month AI-assisted editorial review for a book on AI governance reduced the evocative audit to artistic packaging, completely missing its weight as a formal scholarly method. It took an intervention from Dr. Timnit Gebru, an AI researcher who collaborated closely on the original studies, to point out the glaring omission before the book went to press. Cautionary. Relying entirely on automated search tools or standard bureaucratic oversight guarantees that certain insights will be filtered out. These tools default to citing established metrics, consistently ignoring the human nuance that requires actual proximity to understand. Designing AI governance entirely around statistics builds a system that remains blind to human erasure. True accountability demands the algorithmic spreadsheet to satisfy the regulators, and the human face to ask whether the machine should be allowed to exist in the first place.